The stagecoach rattled into Mojave, California, on a scorching August afternoon in 1882, and Willa Vance could barely feel the heat through the numbness that had settled into her bones during the 3-week journey from Boston. She pressed her gloved hands together in her lap, hiding what lay beneath the thin cotton fabric, and watched through the dusty window as the small desert town materialized like a mirage against the endless expanse of sand and scrub brush. This was supposed to be her new beginning, though she questioned whether someone as broken as herself deserved such a thing. The stagecoach driver called out as they rolled to a stop in front of a weathered building with a sign that read, "General Store and Post Office." Willa's heart hammered against her ribs as she gathered her single carpet bag and stepped down onto the wooden platform, her legs unsteady after so many days of travel. The sun bore down mercilessly, and she raised one hand to shield her eyes as she scanned the handful of people moving along the dusty Main Street. She was looking for Nathan Brennan, the rancher who had answered her letter 3 months ago. Their correspondence had been brief and practical. He needed a wife to help run his household. She needed to escape Boston and the memories that haunted every street corner there. Neither had asked too many questions, which suited Willa just fine. Some things were better left unspoken, at least until they absolutely had to be said. A tall figure separated itself from the shade of the general store's awning, and Willa's breath caught. The man who approached her was lean and weathered, with dark hair that touched his collar beneath a worn Stetson. His face was all hard angles and sun-bronzed skin, but his eyes were a surprising shade of blue-green, like the ocean she had watched from her window back in Boston during those dark months. He moved with the easy confidence of someone who knew exactly who he was and what he was capable of, his boots kicking up small clouds of dust with each step. "Miss Vance." His voice was deep and rough, like gravel shifting beneath wagon wheels. "Yes." She clutched her carpetbag tighter, her gloved fingers aching from the pressure. "Mr. Brennan," he nodded, his gaze sweeping over her face with an intensity that made her want to look away. But Willa had learned long ago not to show weakness, so she held his stare and lifted her chin slightly. Something flickered in those blue-green eyes, something that might have been approval or curiosity, before he reached for her bag. "Let me take that. The wagon is just over there." He gestured toward a sturdy buckboard hitched to 2 horses, both the color of the desert sand surrounding them. Willa followed him, acutely aware of the curious stares from the few townspeople nearby. She knew what they saw: a woman who was too thin, too pale despite the journey west, with shadows under her gray eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and carefully guarded secrets. Her dark blonde hair was pulled back severely, and her traveling dress, though respectable, had seen better days. She was 22 years old and felt ancient. Nathan loaded her bag into the wagon bed with an efficiency that spoke of years of physical labor, then offered his hand to help her up onto the seat. Willa hesitated for just a fraction of a second before accepting, praying that her glove would not slip. His grip was warm and calloused and surprisingly gentle for such a large hand. Once they were both seated and Nathan had gathered the reins, he clicked his tongue and the horses moved forward. They left Mojave's small cluster of buildings behind, heading out into the open desert where the land stretched endlessly in all directions. Mountains rose in the distance, purple-blue against the harsh sky. "The ranch is about an hour north," Nathan said after several minutes of silence. "It is not much to look at, but it is good land. Got a decent creek running through the property year-round, which is worth more than gold out here." "It sounds fine," Willa replied, her voice quieter than she intended. Nathan glanced at her, his expression unreadable beneath the shadow of his hat brim. This is not an easy life. I want to be honest about that from the start. The desert is unforgiving and ranch work is hard, but I am a fair man and I keep my word. I will provide for you and protect you, and I will not demand more than you are willing to give. The last part of his statement hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Willa had wondered, during the long journey, what exactly Nathan would expect from their arrangement. The letters had mentioned nothing about the more intimate aspects of marriage, and she had been too afraid to ask directly. Now she found herself grateful for his careful phrasing, though it did nothing to settle the anxiety twisting in her stomach. "Thank you," she managed. "I will work hard. I promise you that. I can cook and clean and sew. I know how to tend a garden, though I am not sure what grows out here." "Not much without coaxing," Nathan admitted, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly. "But there is a woman in town, Mrs. Chen, who has managed to grow vegetables behind her laundry. She has shared some of her tricks with the folks willing to learn." They fell into silence again, and Willa studied the landscape rolling past. It was so different from Boston, from the crowded streets and the gray Atlantic coast, and the suffocating sense of being trapped that had driven her to answer Nathan's advertisement in the first place. Here, the emptiness felt both terrifying and liberating. There was nowhere to hide in all this open space, but perhaps that also meant there was room to breathe. The Brennan Ranch appeared gradually, rising from the desert like it had grown there naturally. The main house was a low adobe structure with a covered porch that wrapped around two sides. Several outbuildings dotted the property, including a barn, a chicken coop, and what looked like a bunkhouse. A windmill turned slowly near a water tank, its rhythmic creaking carrying on the hot breeze. It was simple and practical and surprisingly welcoming. Nathan pulled the wagon up in front of the house and set the brake before jumping down. He came around to Willa's side and offered his hand again, his blue-green eyes meeting hers with that same careful assessment she had noticed in town. "Welcome home," he said simply. The word home lodged somewhere in Willa's throat, threatening to undo the careful control she had maintained throughout the journey. She blinked hard and accepted his help down from the wagon, her boots sinking slightly into the sandy soil. Nathan retrieved her carpetbag and led her up onto the porch, pushing open the front door. The interior of the house was dim and blessedly cool after the blazing heat outside. Willa's eyes adjusted slowly, taking in the main room with its practical furniture and stone fireplace. Everything was clean but sparse, the home of a man who lived alone and saw no reason for unnecessary decoration. "Your room is through here," Nathan said, crossing to a doorway on the right side of the room. "I have been sleeping in the other bedroom, but if you would prefer different arrangements, we can discuss it." He was giving her a choice, Willa realized. He was offering her the option of separate rooms, at least to start. The relief that washed over her was so intense it made her dizzy. "Separate rooms would be fine," she said carefully, "if that is acceptable to you." Nathan nodded as if he had expected this answer. "I figured as much. There is no rush for anything, Miss Vance. We are strangers, and strangers need time to become something else." He showed her to a small bedroom with a narrow bed, a washstand, a chest of drawers, and a single window that looked out toward the mountains. It was simple but private, and Willa felt some of the tension ease from her shoulders. "I will give you time to settle in," Nathan said from the doorway. "There is water in the pitcher if you want to wash up. When you are ready, come out to the kitchen and I will show you around properly." He closed the door behind him, and Willa was finally alone. She set her carpetbag on the bed and sank down beside it, her whole body suddenly trembling with exhaustion and relief and fear. She had made it. She was here, hundreds of miles from Boston and from Robert, and from the life that had nearly destroyed her. Slowly, carefully, she peeled off her gloves and stared at her wrists. The scars were still red and angry, though they had healed enough that she no longer needed bandages. They ran horizontally across the pale skin, a testament to her desperation and her failure to even manage death properly. Robert's voice echoed in her memory, telling her she was worthless, that she was broken, that no one would ever want her. She had believed him for so long that, when she finally found the courage to take the razor blade, it had felt like the only logical conclusion. But the maid had found her in time, and then her aunt, the only family member who still spoke to her, had sent her west with enough money for the journey and the address of the mail-order bride agency. "Start over," her aunt had whispered as she pressed the bills into Willa's hand. "Before he kills you or you finish what you started." Willa pulled her gloves back on and stood, moving to the washstand. She poured water into the basin and splashed her face, the lukewarm liquid a poor defense against the heat, but refreshing nonetheless. Then she straightened her dress, took a deep breath, and went to find Nathan. He was in the kitchen, which opened off the main room, pumping water into a large pot on the stove. He looked up when she entered, and Willa noticed details she had missed before. The fine lines around his eyes, the old scar on his jaw, the way his shirt pulled across his broad shoulders when he moved. He was probably in his late 20s or early 30s, and there was a weariness about him that suggested his life had not been easy either. "Thought I would start some coffee," he said. "And there is bread and cheese if you are hungry." "Not much of a cook myself, which is one reason I figured a wife might be useful." There was a hint of humor in his tone, and Willa felt herself relax slightly. "Coffee sounds wonderful, and I can start earning my keep with dinner if you will show me what is available." Nathan gestured toward a pantry cupboard. "Help yourself to whatever you find. I keep things pretty basic, but there should be enough to work with. I usually ride into Mojave once a month for supplies, more often if needed." Willa explored the pantry, finding flour, beans, rice, coffee, sugar, dried meat, and a few canned goods. It was indeed basic, but she had worked with less during the lean years after her father died. She pulled out what she needed for a simple stew, grateful to have something to occupy her hands and mind. As she worked, Nathan moved around the kitchen with surprising ease, staying out of her way but close enough to answer questions about where things were kept. They fell into a surprisingly comfortable rhythm, and Willa found herself stealing glances at him when she thought he was not looking. He had removed his hat, revealing hair that was darker than she had initially thought, almost black in the dim kitchen light. His profile was strong and angular, and there was something solid about his presence that made her feel unexpectedly safe. The coffee finished percolating, and Nathan poured 2 cups, adding a generous spoonful of sugar to one before handing it to Willa. "Figured you might need the sweetness after that long trip." She accepted the cup gratefully, wrapping both hands around it despite the warmth of the kitchen. "Thank you. You are very considerate." Nathan shrugged, leaning back against the counter. "Just trying to make this work. I know this arrangement is not exactly conventional, and I figure we both have our reasons for choosing this path. But that does not mean we cannot treat each other with respect." Willa sipped her coffee, studying him over the rim of the cup. "Can I ask why you decided to send for a bride? A man like you. Surely there were women in town who would have been interested." Something shuddered in Nathan's expression, and he looked down into his own cup. "There are not many unmarried women in Mojave, and the ones who are available are either too young or already spoken for in one way or another. Besides, I spent too many years focused on building this ranch to think much about courting. By the time I looked up and realized I was tired of being alone, it seemed simpler to be practical about finding a wife." There was more to the story, Willa sensed, but she was not about to push. Everyone had secrets, and she had more than her share. "Well, I appreciate your practicality," she said quietly. "I needed a fresh start, and you have given me that opportunity. I will do my best to be a good wife." Nathan's blue-green eyes lifted to meet hers, and there was something searching in his gaze. "You do not have to pretend with me, Miss Vance. I can see that you have been hurt. I do not know the details and I will not pry, but I want you to know that you are safe here. Whatever you are running from, it does not have a place on this ranch." The words were so unexpected, so painfully kind, that Willa felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them back furiously, not wanting to break down in front of this stranger who had promised to be her husband. But Nathan had already seen, and he set down his coffee cup and moved closer, though he made no attempt to touch her. "I mean it," he said quietly. "You are safe here." "You do not know what I have done," Willa whispered, her voice breaking. "You do not know what I am. Then tell me, or do not. Either way, my promise stands." Willa set her own cup down before she dropped it, her hands shaking too badly to hold it steady. The gloves suddenly felt like they were suffocating her wrists, but she could not bring herself to remove them. Not yet. Not when Nathan was looking at her with such steady calm, like she was something worth protecting instead of something already broken beyond repair. "I tried to end my life," she said finally, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. 3 months ago. I failed, obviously, but the scars remain. And the man I was engaged to, he was not a good person. He hurt me, and I let him because I thought I deserved it. When I tried to leave, he said he would ruin my reputation and make sure I could never work or marry anyone respectable. So I tried to end it all, and when that failed, my aunt helped me come west. That is what you have agreed to marry, Mr. Brennan. A woman broken enough to try to take her own life. The silence that followed was heavy and terrible. Willa forced herself to meet Nathan's eyes, expecting to see disgust or pity or revulsion. Instead, she saw anger, but it was not directed at her. "Where is he now?" Nathan asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "This man who hurt you in Boston. He has no idea where I went." "Good. Because if he ever shows his face here, he will regret it." Nathan's jaw was tight, and Willa could see the muscles working beneath the tanned skin. Then he took a slow breath and seemed to force himself to relax. "Thank you for telling me. That could not have been easy." "You still want to marry me?" Willa asked, hardly daring to hope. "Even knowing what I am." "You are not broken," Nathan said firmly. "You are a survivor. There is a difference. And yes, I still want to marry you if you will have me, but I want to change one thing about our arrangement." Willa's heart sank. "What?" "I want to wait on the actual wedding until you are ready. We can tell people we are married if you need the propriety, but I will not rush you into vows you might regret. Take your time to settle in, to heal, to decide if this is really what you want. I will wait." The relief was almost painful. "You would do that?" "I just said I would." Nathan's tone was matter of fact. "Now, are you going to finish that stew, or do I need to step in? Because I was not joking when I said I am a terrible cook." Despite everything, Willa found herself smiling. It felt strange on her face, like her muscles had forgotten how to form the expression. But it was there, small and tentative and real. "I will finish the stew," she said. That first evening set the pattern for the days that followed. Nathan was patient and considerate, giving Willa space when she needed it, but always present if she sought him out. He showed her around the ranch, introducing her to the handful of ranch hands who worked the property and explaining the daily rhythms of desert life. Willa threw herself into the work of making the house a home, cooking and cleaning and slowly adding small touches that softened the masculine austerity of the place. She wore her gloves constantly, even in the oppressive heat, until Nathan finally asked her about it one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sun set over the mountains. "You do not have to hide from me," he said quietly. "Whatever those scars look like, they do not change who you are." Willa's throat tightened. "They are ugly. So is the scar on my back from where a bull gored me 5 years ago. Scars are just proof that we survived something that tried to kill us." Slowly, hesitantly, Willa peeled off one glove and then the other. The scars were vivid against her pale skin, and she forced herself not to cover them again immediately. Nathan looked at them for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he gently took her hand in his. "You are still here," he said, his thumb brushing carefully across her wrist just below the scar. "That is what matters. You are still here and you get to decide what comes next." Something shifted in Willa's chest, like a locked door creaking open for the first time in years. She turned her hand in his, lacing their fingers together, and Nathan squeezed gently. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For seeing me as more than what was done to me." Nathan's other hand came up to cup her cheek, his touch warm and rough and infinitely careful. "You are so much more than that. I am just beginning to see how much." The kiss, when it came, was soft and tentative, a question rather than a demand. Willa leaned into it, her free hand coming up to rest against Nathan's chest where she could feel his heart beating steady and strong beneath her palm. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing a little harder, and Willa felt something unfamiliar stirring in her chest. It took her a moment to identify it as hope. "I think I am ready," she said suddenly, Nathan's brow furrowed. "Ready for what? To marry you. For real. Not just for show, but because I want to. Because you have shown me more kindness in 2 weeks than anyone has in years, and I think maybe we could build something real here." Nathan's eyes searched hers, looking for any hint of doubt or reservation. Whatever he saw there must have satisfied him, because he nodded slowly. "If you are sure. But I will not hold you to it if you change your mind." "I will not change my mind." They were married a week later in the small church in Mojave, with Mrs. Chen and her husband standing as witnesses, and the circuit preacher performing a brief but sincere ceremony. Willa wore a simple cream-colored dress that Mrs. Chen had helped her sew from fabric purchased at the general store, and Nathan had cleaned up remarkably well in dark trousers and a pressed shirt. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Nathan kissed her again with the same careful tenderness he had shown that evening on the porch, and Willa felt the last of her walls begin to crumble. The ride back to the ranch was quiet but comfortable, their hands linked between them on the wagon seat. Willa found herself studying Nathan's profile, memorizing the strong line of his jaw and the way the late afternoon sun turned his eyes into something luminous. He caught her looking and smiled, a real smile that transformed his usually serious face into something almost boyish. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "That I am glad I answered your letter, that I am glad I am here." "I am glad too," Nathan said simply. "I know this started as a practical arrangement, but it already feels like more than that. At least to me." "To me too," Willa admitted. That night, Nathan came to her room after they had both prepared for bed, knocking softly on the door. Willa opened it to find him standing there in sleep trousers and an unbuttoned shirt, his dark hair damp from washing. The sight of him made her pulse quicken in a way that was entirely different from the fear she had felt with Robert. "I wanted to ask," Nathan said carefully, "if you would prefer to move into my room, our room. Or I can come here. Or we can continue as we have been if you are not ready. I just thought, since we are married now, you might want things to be different." Willa reached out and took his hand, tugging him gently into the room. "I want things to be different. I want to try to be a real wife to you, even if I am not sure I know how anymore." Nathan closed the door behind him and pulled her into his arms, his hand settling on her waist. "We will figure it out together. And if anything feels wrong or frightening, you tell me immediately. Your comfort matters more than anything else." What followed was tentative and tender and nothing like what Willa had experienced with Robert. Nathan moved slowly, constantly checking to make sure she was all right, his touches gentle and exploratory rather than demanding. When he finally joined their bodies together, Willa gasped at the unfamiliar sensation of pleasure mixed with the physical intimacy. Robert had never cared whether she felt anything beyond pain and submission, but Nathan was different. Nathan cared about her pleasure, about her comfort, about making sure she felt cherished rather than used. Afterwards, they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, Nathan's arm draped protectively over her waist and Willa's head resting on his chest. She could hear his heartbeat gradually slowing back to normal, and the sound was oddly soothing. "Thank you," she murmured against his skin. "For what?" "For being patient with me, for making me feel safe, for showing me that intimacy does not have to be frightening." Nathan's arm tightened around her, and he pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "You do not have to thank me for treating you the way you should have been treated all along. But you are welcome anyway." Willa tilted her head up to look at him, tracing the line of his jaw with her fingertips. "I think I am falling in love with you, Nathan Brennan." His eyes softened and he caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "Good. Because I am already halfway there myself, Willa Brennan." The name sounded right, felt right, like she had finally found the place where she was meant to be. Willa smiled and snuggled closer, letting herself relax completely for the first time in longer than she could remember. Outside, the desert night was cool and filled with stars, and inside she was warm and safe and home. The seasons changed gradually in the high desert, the brutal heat of summer giving way to cooler autumn days and cold nights. Willa settled into ranch life with surprising ease, discovering that she had a talent for managing the household finances and bartering with the merchants in town. Nathan's ranch hands, initially wary of the mail-order bride, quickly warmed to her friendly demeanor and excellent cooking. She learned to ride, though she never quite matched Nathan's easy skill in the saddle, and she started a small garden behind the house, using the techniques Mrs. Chen had shared. Nathan was a patient teacher and an attentive husband, and Willa found herself falling deeper in love with him every day. He had a dry sense of humor that emerged when he was relaxed, and he was unfailingly gentle with her, even as their physical relationship grew more confident and passionate. The nightmares that had plagued her since Boston came less frequently, and when they did, Nathan was always there to hold her until she could breathe normally again. One evening in late October, as they were finishing dinner, Nathan cleared his throat in a way that suggested he had something important to say. Willa looked up from her plate, her fork pausing halfway to her mouth. "What is it?" she asked. "I need to make a trip down to Los Angeles in a few weeks," Nathan said. "There is a Cattlemen's Association meeting, and I have been putting off joining for years because I did not want to leave the ranch. But it would be good for business, and I thought maybe you would like to come with me. See a bigger city, get away from the desert for a bit." Willa's first instinct was to refuse, to stay in the safety of the ranch where nothing could touch her, but she forced herself to consider the offer seriously. She had been healing here, growing stronger, and maybe it was time to test whether that strength would hold up beyond the boundaries of their property. "I would like that," she said finally. "As long as you are with me." Nathan's face broke into a relieved smile. "Of course I will be with you. I am not about to let you wander around Los Angeles alone. The city makes Mojave look like paradise." They made the journey in early November, taking the train from Mojave south through the mountains and into the sprawling chaos of Los Angeles. The city was overwhelming after months in the quiet desert, full of noise and people and buildings that seemed impossibly tall. Willa clung to Nathan's arm as they navigated the crowded streets, grateful for his solid presence beside her. The cattlemen's meeting was boring enough that Nathan apologized twice for subjecting her to it, but Willa did not mind. She enjoyed watching Nathan interact with the other ranchers, seeing the respect he commanded, and the easy authority with which he spoke about cattle breeds and water rights. He was more than just her husband, she realized. He was a successful rancher, a respected member of his community, and a man who had built something lasting from nothing but desert sand and determination. After the meeting, they had 2 days to explore the city before catching the train back north. Nathan took her to a restaurant where they served food Willa had only read about, and they walked through the plaza and watched the crowds. On their last evening, as they were returning to their hotel, Willa spotted a familiar figure across the street, and her blood turned to ice. Robert Hartford stood on the corner, looking exactly as he had the last time she saw him except for a new mustache. He was talking to another man, gesturing animatedly, and had not noticed her yet. But it was only a matter of time. "Willa, what is wrong?" Nathan had noticed her sudden rigidity, and his hand tightened on her arm. "That is him," she whispered. "That is Robert, across the street." Nathan's entire demeanor changed in an instant. His body went taut as a bowstring, and his eyes narrowed dangerously as he followed her gaze. "Are you certain?" "Yes." Willa could barely breathe. "What is he doing here? How is he here?" "I do not know, but he is not going to bother you." Nathan steered her toward the hotel entrance, keeping himself between her and Robert. "Get inside, I will handle this." "Nathan, no, just let it go. Let us leave." But it was too late. Robert had looked up and spotted them, and recognition flashed across his face, followed immediately by a calculating smile that made Willa's stomach turn. He excused himself from his companion and started across the street toward them. Nathan positioned himself firmly in front of Willa, one hand resting on her waist in a gesture that was both protective and possessive. When Robert reached them, his smile had turned oily and false. "Willa, darling, what a surprise to see you here. I have been searching for you for months." Robert's eyes flicked to Nathan, assessing and dismissive. "Who is your companion?" "My husband," Willa said, forcing her voice to remain steady. "Nathan Brennan." Robert's smile slipped. "Husband, but you and I were engaged." "We were never engaged," Willa said firmly. "You terrorized me and hurt me and made me believe I was worthless. But I am not worthless, and I am not yours. I am Nathan's wife, and you have no claim on me." "Now hold on," Robert said, his voice taking on the dangerous edge Willa remembered too well. "You cannot just run off and marry some desert cowboy. You belong in Boston with me. You belong to me." "She does not belong to you," Nathan said, his voice low and hard. "And you need to walk away right now before I make you walk away." Robert laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Is that a threat? Do you know who I am? My family has connections in this city. I could have you arrested for threatening me." "Go ahead and try," Nathan said. "But before you do, you should know that I know what you did to her. I know about the bruises and the fear, and the fact that you drove her to such desperation that she tried to end her own life. So if you think I am going to let you anywhere near her ever again, you are very wrong." Something flickered in Robert's eyes, something ugly and violent, and his hand moved toward his coat pocket. Nathan saw it too and moved faster than Willa would have thought possible, his own hand closing around Robert's wrist in a grip that made the other man wince. "Do not," Nathan said quietly. "Whatever you are reaching for, it is not worth what will happen next." For a long moment, the three of them stood frozen in a tableau of tension. Then Robert jerked his hand free and stepped back, his face flushed with anger and humiliation. "This is not over," he spat. Yes, it is, Willa said, surprised by the strength in her own voice. It is over, Robert. I am not afraid of you anymore, and I am not coming back. Go back to Boston and leave me alone. Robert looked like he wanted to say more, but a passing policeman had noticed the confrontation and was moving toward them. Robert shot them one last poisonous look, then turned and strode away quickly, disappearing into the evening crowds. Willa sagged against Nathan, her legs suddenly unsteady. He caught her immediately, holding her close and murmuring reassurances into her hair. "You did so well," he said. "You were so strong. I am proud of you." "I thought I would fall apart if I ever saw him again," Willa admitted, her voice muffled against Nathan's chest. "But I did not. Because you were here, and I knew I was safe." Nathan pulled back just enough to cup her face in his hands, his blue-green eyes blazing with intensity. "You are always safe with me. Always. I will guard your heart now, Willa, for as long as you will let me." The words hit Willa like a physical blow, knocking loose something that had been lodged in her chest since Boston. She started to cry, great heaving sobs that she had been holding back for months, and Nathan just held her and let her purge the fear and pain and anger until she was empty and exhausted. They left Los Angeles the next morning, both eager to return to the quiet safety of the ranch. On the train ride north, Willa sat pressed against Nathan's side, watching the landscape roll past and thinking about how far she had come in just a few months. She had arrived in California broken and scared, convinced that she would never be whole again. But Nathan had seen past the damage to the person underneath, and he had given her the space and support she needed to start healing. More than that, he had shown her what real love looked like, patient and kind and fierce in its protectiveness. "I love you," she said suddenly, tilting her head up to look at him. Nathan's arm tightened around her shoulders and he pressed a kiss to her temple. "I love you too, more than I knew it was possible to love someone. I want to have a family with you," Willa continued. "I want children and a future and all the normal things I thought I would never deserve." "You deserve everything," Nathan said firmly, "and I will spend the rest of my life making sure you know that." When they arrived back at the ranch, Willa felt like she was truly coming home. The adobe house looked welcoming in the afternoon sun, and the horses in the corral whinnied in recognition as the wagon pulled up. Nathan's ranch hands came out to greet them and help with the luggage, and Willa found herself smiling at their friendly banter. That night, lying in Nathan's arms in the bed they now shared, Willa felt a peace she had never experienced before. The scars on her wrists would always be there, a permanent reminder of how close she had come to losing everything. But they were also proof that she had survived, that she had fought her way back from the darkest place imaginable. And now she had Nathan, who saw those scars not as marks of shame but as evidence of her strength. "What are you thinking about?" Nathan murmured, his fingers tracing idle patterns on her shoulder. "How different my life is now compared to 6 months ago. How grateful I am that I failed." Nathan propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at her with serious eyes. "I am grateful too, more grateful than I can express. But I also wish you had never been hurt so badly in the first place. I wish I could have protected you from all of that." "You are protecting me now," Willa said, reaching up to trace the line of his jaw. "And that is enough, more than enough." Winter came to the high desert, bringing cold winds and occasional snow that dusted the mountains and transformed the landscape into something magical and stark. Willa learned to manage the household through the changing seasons, putting up preserves and managing the supplies so that they would not need to make the trip to Mojave too often when the weather was bad. She also discovered that she was pregnant, a realization that filled her with equal parts joy and terror. When she told Nathan, He picked her up and spun her around, laughing with pure delight before carefully setting her back down and fussing over whether he had been too rough. Willa laughed at his sudden overcautiousness, but she was also touched by how immediately protective he became. He insisted on taking over any heavy chores and made sure she rested more than she worked, though Willa protested that she was not made of glass. "I know you are not," Nathan said, his hand resting gently on her still flat stomach. "But you are carrying something precious, and I am going to take care of both of you." The pregnancy progressed without major complications, though Willa experienced the expected discomforts and mood swings. Nathan bore it all with remarkable patience, even when she cried over burnt bread or snapped at him for leaving his boots in the wrong place. He rubbed her aching back and her swollen feet, and he talked to her growing belly about the ranch and the horses and how excited he was to meet his son or daughter. In early summer, with the desert heat once again bearing down mercilessly, Willa went into labor. Mrs. Chen came from town to serve as midwife, and Nathan paced anxiously outside the bedroom until the sound of a baby's cry brought him rushing back inside. Willa, exhausted but triumphant, held their newborn son in her arms, and the expression on Nathan's face when he saw them both was something she would treasure forever. "He is perfect," Nathan whispered, carefully touching one tiny fist. "You did amazing. He is perfect and you are perfect." They named him Samuel, after Nathan's father, and he became the center of their world. Nathan was a devoted father, surprising Willa with his natural ease with the baby. He would walk the floors with Samuel when he was fussy, and he talked to him constantly about ranch life and horses and everything else under the sun. Willa would watch them together and feel her heart swell with love for both of them. Samuel grew into a sturdy, cheerful toddler with his father's dark hair and his mother's gray eyes. He loved the ranch animals and the desert landscape, and he followed Nathan around like a devoted shadow whenever possible. Willa taught him his letters and numbers while Nathan taught him to ride, and together they raised him in an atmosphere of love and security that Willa had never experienced as a child herself. 2 years after Samuel's birth, Willa gave birth to a daughter they named Alice. She had her father's blue-green eyes and a stubborn streak that showed up remarkably early. Samuel was initially uncertain about having to share his parents' attention, but he quickly became a protective older brother who took his responsibilities seriously. The house that had once seemed so spare and masculine was now filled with the noise and chaos of family life, and Willa could not imagine being happier. One evening, when Samuel was 5 and Alice was 3, the whole family was sitting on the porch watching the sunset. Samuel was explaining to Alice about the different colors in the sky, while Nathan sat with Willa tucked against his side. Willa's hands rested in her lap, ungloved as they always were now, and she absently traced the scars on her wrists. "You ever think about Boston?" Nathan asked quietly. Willa considered the question. "Sometimes, but it feels like a different life, one that happened to a different person. That woman who got off the stagecoach 7 years ago, she was so broken and scared. I barely recognize her now." "She was brave," Nathan said. "She was brave enough to leave everything behind and start over. That takes incredible courage. I did not feel brave. I felt desperate." "Sometimes they are the same thing." Nathan caught her hand, lacing their fingers together. "I am glad you answered my letter. I cannot imagine my life without you and the children now." "Neither can I," Willa admitted. "You saved me, Nathan. You and this place and the life we have built together. You gave me reasons to live when I could not find any on my own." Nathan turned to face her, his expression serious. "You saved yourself, Willa. I just provided a safe place for you to heal. Everything else, all the strength and courage and determination, that was all you." "We saved each other then," Willa said softly. "Because I know you were lonely before I came. I know this ranch was just work and no joy. We made it a home together." Nathan kissed her, slow and sweet, and Willa felt the familiar warmth bloom in her chest. After all these years, his kisses still had the power to make her feel cherished and desired and perfectly safe. "Mama, Papa, look," Samuel called out. "A shooting star." They all turned to watch the streak of light across the darkening sky, and Alice clapped her hands in delight. Willa leaned her head on Nathan's shoulder and thought about wishes and second chances, and the unexpected ways that life could surprise you. She had come to the desert expecting nothing more than survival, and instead she had found love and family, and a sense of belonging that went deeper than she had ever imagined possible. The years continued to pass, marked by the rhythms of ranch life and the growth of their children. Samuel grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved working alongside his father and dreamed of one day running the ranch himself. Alice was wild and fearless, more comfortable on horseback than on her own feet, and she kept her parents constantly busy trying to keep up with her adventures. When Samuel was 8 and Alice was 6, Willa gave birth to another son they named Thomas, who had his mother's quiet determination and his father's steady temperament. The ranch prospered under Nathan's management, and he was able to expand their holdings and improve their stock. He had long since joined the Cattlemen's Association, and he was respected throughout the region as a fair dealer and a skilled rancher. Willa became active in the growing community of Mojave, helping to establish a proper school and organizing charitable efforts for families struggling through hard times. She never forgot what it felt like to be desperate and alone, and she made sure that anyone who came to her for help received it without judgment. Mrs. Chen became a close friend, and the two women often collaborated on projects to improve life in Mojave. Mrs. Chen's children grew up alongside the Brennan children, and the families spent many holidays and celebrations together. The desert that had once seemed so empty and forbidding became filled with connections and friendships that enriched Willa's life in unexpected ways. One afternoon, when Willa was in town picking up supplies, she ran into a traveling photographer who had set up shop in the general store. On impulse, she arranged for him to come to the ranch the following week to take a family photograph. When she told Nathan about it that evening, he looked uncertain. "I am not sure I am very photogenic," he said dubiously. Willa laughed. "Nonsense. You are very handsome, and I want to have a picture of all of us together, something to hang on the wall and look at when we are old and gray." "I am already going gray," Nathan pointed out, running a hand through his hair, which was indeed starting to show silver at the temples. "Then we should capture you before you are completely silver," Willa teased. The day of the photograph, Willa dressed everyone in their best clothes and made sure hair was combed and faces were clean. The photographer set up his equipment on the porch, positioning the family carefully. Nathan stood behind Willa with his hand on her shoulder while she held baby Thomas in her lap. Samuel and Alice flanked them, trying very hard to hold still despite their natural exuberance. "Think of something that makes you happy," the photographer instructed. "Something you love." Willa looked at Nathan, who was looking back at her with such open affection that it made her breath catch. The children were all grinning, and Thomas reached up to grab at her necklace. In that moment, Willa felt overwhelmingly grateful for the strange path that had brought her here, for the courage it had taken to answer that advertisement, for the kindness Nathan had shown her from the very beginning. The photographer's flash went off, capturing them frozen in that perfect moment of love and contentment. When the photograph was finally ready a few weeks later, Willa had it framed and hung it in the main room where everyone could see it. She would often pause in front of it during her daily chores, studying the faces looking back at her and marveling at how much her life had changed. The woman in that photograph looked happy and healthy and whole, so different from the broken girl who had arrived in Mojave all those years ago. As the children grew older, they began to ask questions about their parents' pasts. Samuel, in particular, was curious about why Mama and Papa had never lived in Boston together, why they had married through letters instead of meeting like his friends' parents had. Willa and Nathan had discussed how to handle these questions, and they had agreed to be honest in age-appropriate ways. One evening, when Samuel was 12 and pressing particularly hard for answers, Nathan took him out to the barn under the pretense of checking on a mare about to foal. Willa watched them go, her heart in her throat, and prayed that Nathan would find the right words. They were gone for over an hour, and when they returned, Samuel's face was serious but not upset. He came straight to Willa and wrapped his arms around her in a fierce hug. "Papa told me that you were very brave to come all the way out here by yourself," he said, "and that you had been hurt by bad people before, but you did not let that stop you from building a new life. I think you are the bravest person I know, Mama." Willa's eyes filled with tears, and she held her son close, breathing in the familiar scent of horse and hay and boy. "Thank you, sweetheart. That means more to me than you know." Over Samuel's shoulder, she met Nathan's eyes and mouthed, "Thank you." He nodded, his expression soft with understanding. The conversation with Samuel opened the door for similar conversations with Alice, and eventually with Thomas as they got older. Each child reacted differently to learning about their mother's past, but all of them emerged from the discussions with a deeper appreciation for her strength and a fierce protectiveness that reminded Willa very much of their father. When Samuel was 16, a man showed up at the ranch claiming to be looking for work. Nathan was in town, so Willa spoke to the man herself, trying to assess whether he would be a good fit. There was something familiar about him that she could not quite place, until he smiled and she saw the resemblance to Robert Hartford. Her blood ran cold. "Who are you?" she demanded, her hand instinctively moving to the rifle they kept by the door. "Jacob Hartford," the man said, his smile turning calculating. "I believe you knew my brother Robert before you ran away to play at being a rancher's wife." "I did not run away, and I am not playing at anything. This is my home, and you need to leave right now." "Oh, I do not think so," Jacob said, taking a step closer. "You see, Robert died 3 years ago. Bad heart, the doctors said. But before he died, he told me all about you and how you humiliated him. And I have been looking for you ever since, because I do not believe my brother's honor should go unavenged." Willa's finger found the rifle trigger, and she lifted it so it pointed directly at Jacob's chest. Her hands were steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. "I do not care what your brother told you. He was a monster who hurt me and terrorized me, and I am not sorry he is dead. Now get off my property before I shoot you for trespassing." "You would not dare," Jacob scoffed, but there was uncertainty in his eyes now. "Try me," Willa said coldly. "I fought too hard for this life to let someone like you take it away from me." A voice called out from behind Jacob, and Willa's heart leaped as she saw Samuel riding up fast on his horse, Nathan right behind him. They must have seen the confrontation from a distance and hurried back. Nathan was off his horse before it fully stopped, positioning himself between Jacob and Willa. "Who are you and what do you want?" Nathan demanded, his whole body radiating barely controlled anger. Jacob's confidence had evaporated in the face of 2 more opponents. "Nobody. Just a traveler looking for work. I will be going now." "Good," Nathan said. "And if you come back, you will be met with more than just threats. My wife is right. She fought too hard for this life, and I will not let anyone threaten what we have built." Jacob retreated to his horse and rode off quickly, casting one last venomous look over his shoulder. When he was out of sight, Nathan gently took the rifle from Willa's hands and pulled her into his arms. "Are you all right?" he murmured into her hair. "I am fine," Willa said, and she realized it was true. She was shaken but not broken. He was Robert's brother. He came here looking to avenge his honor or some nonsense like that. "Robert is dead." Nathan pulled back to look at her face. "Apparently, 3 years ago." Willa felt nothing at the news, no grief or satisfaction, just a vague sense of closure. "I suppose that means he cannot hurt me anymore." "He never could," Nathan said firmly. "Not once you were here with me, but I am still sorry you had to face his brother alone." "I was not afraid," Willa realized. "Or at least, not the way I used to be. I knew I could handle him, and I knew you would come. That makes all the difference." Samuel had been hovering anxiously nearby, and now he stepped forward. "Are you sure you are all right, Mama?" "Do you want me to go after him?" "No," Willa said firmly. "Let him go. He is not worth the trouble, but thank you for riding back so quickly." Samuel nodded, still looking worried, and Willa reached out to squeeze his arm. Her son had grown tall and strong, and the protective look in his eyes reminded her so much of Nathan that it made her chest ache with love. That evening, after the children were in bed, Nathan and Willa sat on the porch as they had done countless times before. The desert stretched out around them, quiet and vast, and above them the stars blazed in the dark sky. "You think he will come back?" Willa asked quietly. "No," Nathan said. "He was a coward just like his brother. Cowards prey on people they think are weak, and you showed him very clearly that you are not weak. He will move on to easier targets." "I hate that there are people like that in the world," Willa said. "People who hurt others and think they are justified in doing so." "I know. But there are also people like you, who survive and heal and build beautiful lives despite the hurt. And people like Samuel, who rode back here as fast as he could because he saw his mother might be in danger. The good people outnumber the bad ones, even if it does not always feel that way." Willa leaned her head on Nathan's shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him beneath her cheek. "How did you get so wise? Living in the desert, it teaches you what really matters." Nathan pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "And loving you has taught me the rest." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel slowly overhead. Willa thought about the girl she had been when she first arrived in Mojave, so fragile and frightened that a kind word was enough to make her cry. That girl had grown into a woman who could face down a man with a rifle and not flinch, who could raise children and run a household and contribute to her community. The transformation had not happened overnight, but it had happened, and it was real. "I have been thinking," Nathan said after a while. "Samuel is going to be ready to take on more responsibility around the ranch soon. And Alice is already a better rider than some of my hands. Maybe in a few years, when Thomas is older, you and I could take a trip. See some of the country beyond California. Would you like that?" "I would love that," Willa said. "As long as we are together, I think I could go anywhere and be all right. Even back to Boston," Nathan asked carefully. Willa considered the question. A few years ago, the thought of returning to the city that held so many terrible memories would have been unthinkable. But now, with the perspective of time and healing, she found that the idea did not frighten her as much as it once might have. "Maybe even Boston," she said. "To show you where I came from, to prove to myself that those memories do not have power over me anymore." "Only if you are ready," Nathan said. "There is no rush. We have all the time in the world." And that, Willa thought, was the most precious gift Nathan had given her: time. Time to heal, time to grow, time to become the person she was meant to be instead of the broken victim Robert had tried to make her. Nathan had seen potential in her when she could not see it in herself, and he had given her the space and support she needed to become whole again. The years continued their steady march forward, bringing with them the usual mix of joys and challenges. There were droughts that tested the ranch's resources, and illnesses that reminded them how fragile life could be. But through it all, Nathan and Willa faced everything together, their partnership grown stronger with each passing season. Samuel grew into a young man who was the image of his father in both appearance and temperament. He courted and married a young woman from a neighboring ranch, and they built a small house on the Brennan property so Samuel could take over more of the day-to-day operations. Nathan was proud to step back slightly and let his son prove himself, though he was always available for advice when needed. Alice defied expectations by declaring that she had no interest in marriage and instead wanted to breed and train horses. Nathan and Willa supported her decision, setting her up with a section of the ranch dedicated to her equine pursuits. She developed a reputation throughout the region for producing exceptional cow ponies, and she was happy and fulfilled in a way that had nothing to do with traditional expectations for women. Thomas, the youngest, turned out to have a gift for numbers and organization that made him invaluable in managing the ranch's business affairs. He was quieter than his siblings but no less determined, and he brought a level of efficiency to the operation that allowed it to thrive even in difficult economic times. When Willa turned 45, Nathan surprised her with the trip he had promised years earlier. They left the ranch in the capable hands of their children and took the train east, retracing the journey Willa had made so many years before. They visited Denver and Chicago and finally arrived in Boston, where Willa had not set foot in over 2 decades. The city had changed, grown larger and more modern, but the bones of it were still familiar. Nathan held Willa's hand as they walked through the streets where she had once felt so trapped, and Willa found herself marveling at how different everything looked through the lens of her current happiness. The places that had once represented only pain and fear now seemed small and distant, part of a story that had ended well despite its difficult beginning. They found her aunt's house, and Willa knocked on the door with her heart pounding. An older woman answered, her face lined but her eyes still sharp and kind. She stared at Willa for a long moment before recognition dawned. "Willa, is that really you?" "Hello, Aunt Margaret. I wanted to thank you for saving my life." Aunt Margaret burst into tears and pulled Willa into a fierce embrace. They spent the afternoon catching up, with Willa sharing stories of her life in California and showing photographs of her children and grandchildren. Aunt Margaret was delighted and emotional, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief as she studied the pictures. "I am so glad you found happiness," she said. "I prayed for it every day after you left, but I was never sure my prayers were answered. Now I know they were." "They were," Willa confirmed, squeezing her aunt's hand. "More than I ever imagined possible." Before they left Boston, Willa asked Nathan to take her to the cemetery where her parents were buried. She had not been there since shortly after her father's death, and she wanted to pay her respects now that she was strong enough to face the memories. They stood together in front of the simple headstones, and Willa told her parents about the life she had built, the family she had raised, the woman she had become. "I think they would be proud of you," Nathan said quietly. "I hope so," Willa replied. "I am proud of me, and that is something I never thought I would be able to say." They returned to California in early autumn, arriving back at the ranch to an enthusiastic welcome from their children and grandchildren. Samuel's wife had given birth to twins while they were away, and Alice had successfully trained a particularly difficult horse that was already drawing buyer interest. Thomas had managed the books flawlessly and had even negotiated a better price for their cattle at market. Standing on the porch of the ranch house, Surrounded by the noise and chaos of family, Willa felt a contentment so profound it brought tears to her eyes. Nathan noticed, of course, and pulled her aside with a concerned expression. "What is wrong?" he asked. "Nothing is wrong," Willa said, wiping at her eyes and laughing. "Everything is so right that I cannot quite believe it sometimes. I keep waiting for something to ruin it, but it never does." Nathan cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away her tears. "It is not going to be ruined. This is real, and it is yours, and it is ours. We built this together, and nothing can take it away." "I love you," Willa said. "I have loved you for so long, but I do not think I have ever quite managed to tell you how much. You gave me everything, Nathan. You gave me safety and love and a family and a purpose. You gave me myself back when I thought that person was lost forever." "You gave me all those things too," Nathan said. "I was just existing before you came, going through the motions of life without really living. You brought joy and meaning and love into this house, and you made me understand what it meant to truly be happy. So we are even, I think." They kissed, long and deep, with the sounds of their family carrying on around them. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. "Do you ever regret answering my advertisement?" Nathan asked. "Not for a single moment," Willa said firmly. "It was the best decision I ever made. You are the best thing that ever happened to me." "Same here," Nathan said. "Though I think technically you are the best thing that ever happened to me." "Then we agree," Willa said, linking her arm through his. "We are both the best thing that happened to each other." They walked back into the house together, ready to rejoin the family gathering. As they crossed the threshold, Willa glanced down at her wrists, where the scars were now faded to thin white lines barely visible against her tanned skin. She touched them absently, a habit she had developed over the years, and felt only gratitude. Those scars had once represented the lowest point of her life, but now they symbolized her survival and her strength. Nathan had promised to guard her heart all those years ago, and he had kept that promise every single day since. But more than that, he had taught her how to guard her own heart, how to protect herself and value herself and believe that she deserved love and happiness. That lesson had been worth more than anything else he could have given her. The evening wore on with the usual chaos of a large family gathering. Children ran through the house chasing each other, while the adults shared stories and laughter over dinner. Willa cooked alongside her daughters-in-law, enjoying the camaraderie and the sense of continuity. These young women were now part of the family legacy, helping to carry it forward into the future. After everyone had finally gone home or to bed, Nathan and Willa found themselves alone on the porch once again. It had become their place over the years, the spot where they had shared so many conversations and quiet moments. The desert night was cool and clear, and the familiar constellations wheeled overhead. "You remember the first night we sat out here?" Nathan asked. "Of course," Willa said. "I was terrified and trying to hide it. You were patient and kind, even though you had no idea what you were getting yourself into by taking me in." "I knew exactly what I was getting into," Nathan corrected. "I was getting a wife who was brave enough to travel across the country alone, smart enough to see that a fresh start was worth risking everything for, and strong enough to survive whatever had come before. I was getting you, and that was all I needed to know." "You could not have known all that from a few letters," Willa protested. "Maybe not from the letters, but I knew at the moment I saw you step off that stagecoach. You had this look in your eyes, like you were daring the world to try to break you again. I saw that look and I thought, there is a woman worth knowing. There is a woman worth loving." Willa leaned against him, marveling at how well they still fit together after all these years. "I am glad you thought so. I am glad you took a chance on a mail-order bride with more baggage than belongings." Best gamble I ever took, Nathan said, and I would do it again in a heartbeat. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars and listening to the desert night sounds. A coyote called in the distance, its cry echoing across the empty spaces. An owl hooted from somewhere near the barn. The windmill creaked steadily, drawing water from deep underground. These were the sounds of home, as familiar and comforting as a heartbeat. "I have been thinking," Willa said after a while, "about writing down our story, not for publication or anything like that, but for the grandchildren, so they know where they came from and what we survived to build this family." Nathan considered this. "That sounds like a good idea. Though you should probably leave out some of the more difficult parts until they are older." "Obviously," Willa agreed, "but I want them to know that life is not always easy, and that sometimes the best things come from the hardest struggles. I want them to know that healing is possible and that love can transform everything." "Then you should write it," Nathan said. "You have always had a way with words. I think it would be beautiful." So Willa began writing, spending her evenings recording the story of how a broken young woman had traveled west to marry a stranger and had found not just safety but genuine happiness and love. She wrote about the scars and the fear and the slow process of learning to trust again. She wrote about Nathan's patience and kindness, about the way he had given her space to heal while still making it clear that she was valued and loved. She wrote about building a family and a home in the harsh beauty of the desert, about facing down old demons and emerging stronger on the other side. It took her several months to finish, working in the quiet hours when everyone else was asleep. When she finally completed the manuscript, she showed it to Nathan first. He read it through in one sitting, and when he looked up, his eyes were suspiciously bright. "This is beautiful," he said hoarsely. "You captured it all perfectly, the fear and the hope and the love. Our children and grandchildren are going to treasure this." "I hope so," Willa said. "I want them to understand that their family was built on love and second chances. I want them to know that no matter what challenges they face, they have the strength to overcome them because they come from people who did exactly that." Nathan pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "I love you, Willa Brennan. I have loved you since the day you arrived in Mojave with shadows in your eyes and scars on your wrists. I will love you until the day I die and probably beyond that too." "I love you too," Willa whispered against his chest. "You saved my life in every way that matters. You gave me a reason to keep living when I had given up on finding one. You are my heart, Nathan Brennan, and you have been since the beginning." They stood there in the middle of their home, surrounded by evidence of the life they had built together, and felt the weight of all those years of love and partnership and shared joy. It had not always been easy. There had been struggles and sorrows along the way, moments when it seemed like the world was determined to test them. But they had faced it all together, and they had emerged stronger for it. The next morning, Willa gathered her children and grandchildren together in the main room of the ranch house. She had made copies of the manuscript for each family to keep, and she presented them with a mixture of nervousness and pride. "I have written down the story of how your father and I met and built this family," she told them. "Some of it is difficult, and some of it is painful, but all of it is true. I want you to have it so you understand where you come from and what it means to be a Brennan." Samuel took his copy reverently, already flipping through the pages. Alice was reading over his shoulder, her eyes wide. Thomas accepted his with a solemn nod. The grandchildren were bouncing with excitement, though Willa had warned them that they would need to wait until they were older to read it. "Thank you, Mama," Samuel said quietly. "This is an incredible gift." "You are all the incredible gift," Willa replied. "Every single one of you. You are proof that love and determination can overcome anything. You are the reason I am grateful I survived, even when surviving seemed impossible." The family spent the rest of the day together, asking questions about the story and sharing their own memories of growing up on the ranch. Willa found herself laughing and crying in equal measure as she recounted various incidents and explained how different things had been when she first arrived. Nathan contributed his own perspective, adding details Willa had forgotten or never known. As the sun began to set and people started to drift home, Samuel approached his parents with a thoughtful expression. "I just want you to know," he said, "that I have always been proud to be your son. But reading your story, understanding everything you went through to get here, it makes me even prouder. You are both the strongest people I know." "We are just people who love each other," Nathan said simply. "That is all we have ever been." "That is enough," Samuel said. "More than enough." After everyone had left, Nathan and Willa returned to their customary spot on the porch. The sun was setting in a blaze of orange and pink and purple, painting the desert in colors so vivid they almost hurt to look at. It was the kind of sunset that reminded Willa why she had fallen in love with this harsh, beautiful place. "How do you feel?" Nathan asked. "About sharing your story with everyone." "Nervous," Willa admitted, "but also relieved. I do not want there to be secrets in our family. I want everyone to know the truth so they can learn from it." "You are an amazing woman, Willa Brennan. Have I told you that recently?" "You tell me every day," Willa said. "In 1,000 different ways, with every kind word and gentle touch and patient gesture. You have been telling me since the day we met." "Good," Nathan said, "because I plan to keep telling you for as long as I have breath in my body." They watched the sun disappear below the horizon, and the first stars began to appear in the deepening sky. The temperature dropped rapidly, as it always did in the desert, and Nathan draped a blanket around Willa's shoulders. She snuggled into its warmth, perfectly content. "I have been thinking about what comes next," Nathan said after a while. "Samuel is ready to take over the ranch completely. Maybe it is time for us to take another trip, see more of the country. Or we could just stay here and enjoy watching the grandchildren grow. What do you think?" Willa considered the question. She had spent so many years focused on survival, then on building a family, that she had not thought much about what came after those goals were achieved. But now, with their children grown and successful, with grandchildren bringing new joy into their lives, she realized that she and Nathan had the freedom to choose their own adventure once again. "I think," she said slowly, "that I want to do whatever makes you happy. As long as we are together, I do not care where we go or what we do. You are my home, Nathan. You have been from the very beginning." Nathan's arm tightened around her, and she felt him press a kiss to the top of her head. "You are my home too, and as long as I have you, I have everything I need." They sat together under the emerging stars. Two people who had found each other against all odds and had built something lasting and beautiful from their shared determination to survive and thrive. The scars on Willa's wrists had long since faded into just another part of her story, no longer a source of shame but a reminder of how far she had come. Nathan's promise to guard her heart had evolved into something deeper and more mutual, a partnership built on trust and respect, and a love that had only grown stronger with time. The desert night settled around them, cool and quiet and infinite. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called again, and Nathan's horses answered with soft whickers from the corral. The windmill continued its steady rhythm, pumping life, giving water from deep underground. Inside the house, lamps glowed warmly, lighting the rooms where their children had grown and their grandchildren now played. This was home. This was family. This was the life that Willa had never dared to dream of during those dark days in Boston when death had seemed like the only escape. Nathan had given her a chance to start over, and she had taken that chance and built something magnificent from it. They had built something magnificent together, and it would endure long after they were gone. "I love you," Willa said again, because the words never got old and never felt like enough to express what was in her heart. "I love you too," Nathan replied. "Always and forever, Willa, always and forever." And as they sat together under the vast desert sky, surrounded by the life they had created, Willa knew with absolute certainty that she had made the right choice all those years ago when she stepped off the stagecoach in Mojave. She had chosen to survive. She had chosen to heal. She had chosen to love and be loved in return. And those choices had made all the difference, transforming her from a broken young woman into someone strong and whole and deeply, permanently happy. The stars wheeled overhead, ancient and constant, bearing witness to their story just as they had borne witness to countless stories before, and would bear witness to countless stories to come. But in that moment, under that sky in that place, Nathan and Willa's story felt like the only one that mattered. It was a story of survival and healing and love, of second chances and new beginnings, of two scarred souls finding each other and creating something beautiful together. And it was a story that would continue, carried forward by their children and grandchildren and all the generations yet to come. It would live on in the ranch they had built, in the family they had raised, in the love they had shared so freely and completely. It would live on as a testament to the fact that even the darkest moments can lead to the brightest futures, and that no one is ever too broken to deserve love and happiness. Nathan and Willa sat together on their porch, holding hands under the stars, and felt the peace that comes from knowing you are exactly where you are meant to be, with exactly the person you are meant to be with. Their journey had been long and difficult, marked by pain and struggle and hard-won victories. But they had made it through together, and the life they had built was worth every hardship they had faced along the way. The desert wind whispered through the darkness, carrying the scent of sage and sand, and in that wind were all the promises they had made and kept, all the love they had given and received, all the years they had shared and would continue to share until the end of their days. It was enough. More than enough. It was everything,